Thank you very much for coming out to the Ross Brothers Museum. It's fantastic, and you can't take the cars away. My apologies. But I'd like to introduce Nick Ross, who is fourth generation? Third generation Ross Brothers, to kick things off, and then I'll take you through the presentation.
Yeah, I can get that loud enough. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ross Brothers Museum. Just a bit of housekeeping. Toilets are just through the two doors here into the corner. If you have to evacuate, just down the path and out onto the road, please. Other than that, yeah, welcome here. On behalf of the Ross Brothers, pretty keen to have this here to get everybody involved. At the end of the gathering, you're more than welcome to have a good look around. If you hang around long enough, Murray over here, who looks after our museum, will take you next door and crank up that big loader out there. So, yeah, something to look forward to. But thanks everybody for coming. Any questions, just come and see Murray or myself at the end of the meeting, and we'll try and answer them. All right, cheers.
Okay, so the way to work is I'll take you through the presentation, and Barney Irvine on my right here will fill in some of the bits and pieces from the Northern Infrastructure Forum as we go. But the idea of this is to introduce you to the Northern Infrastructure Forum, which is essentially a think tank for infrastructure, and we're focusing today on roading. So, infrastructure in New Zealand, I'm probably telling you nothing new. Infrastructure in New Zealand is in urgent need of some leadership, and we feel that as a group of firms, members, chambers, that there needs to be some factual research done so that we can influence the decision making both by politicians, bureaucrats, and also Treasury, who hold the dollars and cents. So in the past it's been very politicised, and we're looking to be able to put out good information. People can have a debate over it and have research prove what are the better alternatives out there. The infrastructure bodies over the last 10 years basically have walked backwards a little bit, and we're hoping this will start pushing them forward. So we've come up with a concept for roading that is more than just a road like Cambridge to Pairiri. It's actually a northern infrastructure network that connects the regions to Auckland. Northland to Auckland, Tauranga, Rotorua, Hawke's Bay, Taranaki, Waikato to Auckland, and is a long-term infrastructure plan that people can go, okay, that's what we want, let's work towards it, because we can't afford it in one hit, unfortunately, as a bit of money has been spent over the last few years. So we see that the Infrastructure Forum will do the research, and then the chambers and its members, of which many of you are, will do the lobbying to government to amplify the message that we're pushing out and the research. And it's something that we can sit down with Treasury and go, this is independent research that has proven that we should be doing, whether it's Southern Links, Highway 29 to Tauranga, or whatever we choose to do. So we're looking to get a single voice or a common voice for infrastructure in the Upper North Island. There's a few bodies that do that. We're looking to be able to add weight to what they're saying, also influence what, say, for example, the Mayoral Forum might be saying. We're intending to do it with independent and accurate economic research and analysis, so that if there is a counter a counterfactual counter-argument. We're debating facts, not emotions or what ideology a particular party may want. The basis of it is going to be a very strong economic base and an engineering base, so that it is based on solid facts. Do you want to check this slide roll?
Yeah, okay, why not?
Binoculars.
So, hi everybody, I'm Barney Irvine. I'm the coordinator for this infrastructure forum, and apologies for not being Simon Bridges today. I could try and impersonate, but I don't think it'll work. Simon's obviously the chair of this group, but look, this was the first piece of work that we did. We wanted to start with a bit of a bang and settle on an area of research that was really important to our members, but that we also knew would get cut through within the sector and would fit in really nicely with the discussion around transport ahead of the election last year. And so what we wanted to do with it is get a much better understanding of the value of investment in the highway network. And whereas previous analysis has tended to focus just on the immediate benefits of these new highway projects in terms of travel time savings and resilience, right? So less closures. What this analysis has done is looked at what we call the wider economic benefits, and so that's thinking about, well, okay, once you do put in place this piece of infrastructure, and we do get better travel times, and as a result of those travel times and improved reliability, we get more businesses popping up along the corridor, as we call it, and you only need to look out here to see plenty of evidence of that. Well, what productivity benefits do we get as a result? And when we measure the benefits of that productivity right through the economy, what does it look like? And it's pretty complex sort of business, and it can go in many different directions. But what came out of it was pretty compelling. So we looked at these two quite high-profile highway projects in terms of Warkworth to Welsford and Cambridge to Periri, and looked at, okay, what would the wider economic benefits of those two pieces of infrastructure be? And both of them, the findings showed would contribute about $500 million each year in to GDP, which when you think about the construction cost of several $1 billion, you're paying that off pretty quickly with that sort of benefit. And so one of the lines there we were using is for every year that you delay projects of this quality, you're leaving $500 million on the table. And the point that we really stressed with it was that this is not just about highway projects. You can make exactly the same argument about urban roads, or about urban rail projects, or about some sort of inter-island ferries, if you want. But the point is, really good infrastructure delivers really good benefits, and that's what we were really trying to stress with it.
Okay. I think one of the truisms in infrastructure is that commerce follows arterial routes, and arterial routes are the lifeblood of a country like New Zealand, connecting all of the ports together: Whangarei, New Plymouth, Auckland, Tauranga, Hawke's Bay, gives us some form of resilience in the case of a calamity of proportions that we had down the East Coast last year. So the idea is that we can give, and when you're presenting to politicians, they always take your case or your idea and they run it up against what Treasury thinks. And this methodology that we use is what Treasury uses. So they are comfortable with it, and if our facts actually are strong enough, we will be able to get past one of the major hurdles in Wellington. So we're looking at a forward research program.
I think you can skip this one. I'll cover it
Okay,
later.
sounds fine. So the value proposition is we want connected decision making. We want the North Island to be connected so that we are as enthusiastic about a road to Kerikeri as we are to Tauranga, and the methodology that we use to analyse that is identical. And we're looking, when you take a project to Wellington, you've got to actually be thinking about New Zealand Inc., not just what's happening in the Waikato or what's happening in the Bay of Plenty or Northland. And the other part that I think is almost as important is we need to have a pipeline of infrastructure investment and projects. And I think we've lost quite a bit of talent to Australia where they have that sort of thing, and we need to be able to either grow it ourselves or bring it back so that there's 20 or 30 years of good infrastructure projects for our people to work on. We want to be able to hold local and national government to account on some of the choices they make. Again, with good research, if we can say research has proven that the direction you're taking is not giving a positive benefit to the country, that makes that discussion reasonably straightforward.
Oh, sorry, Dom. And one other point to that is the benefit of doing that via a third party, in this case our forum, is that the forum's able to say things on behalf of the group that you couldn't say personally, or that one particular organisation might well struggle to say, particularly if it has contracts with NZTA or a council. So that's a key benefit of the group, being able to hold to account without jeopardising those relationships.
So what we're asking for is some members to join. Basically, the research that we did for Cambridge to Pairiri and Warkworth to Wellsford cost the better part of 100k, and so we're looking for members to join the forum so that we can progress further research. The current members, you want to go through that?
Yeah. Yes, so what it's really been about for us, right at the centre of it over the past year, is just sort of growing the organisation. And so we've got these foundation members on the left. They formed a group called the Auckland Business Forum sort of 10 or 15 years ago. So that group was around for some time. James is here from National Road Carriers. I was a member of it through the AA, the Automobile Association, for a number of years too. And we had a lot of success, but the problem is we were too small and we didn't have a big enough war chest to be able to operate strategically and set the terms of the debate, and that's what we've really sought to do to grow that war chest, and the only way to do that is to grow your membership base. So that's been a big focus over the past year. It's been slow going, as most of you can imagine. You talk to piles of people who love what you're doing and completely agree with everything, and there's piles of alignment and everything, but it doesn't necessarily flow directly into money coming into the account, and there's quite a long lag, as we've found. But we've had some success, and so we're, in terms of the new joins down there on the right hand side, some well-known organisations and pretty sort of reputable brands, and what what those have done, obviously, is they've contributed a lot in terms of credibility, but also some really good IP and expertise that we're able to draw on. So, we've managed to almost double the number of the size of the group in terms of number, and almost treble the revenue base. But there's a long way to go, and that's obviously, as Don was saying, a big part of the reason that we're here today. And I guess what we're aiming for is a situation where we can do sort of 2 or 3 chunky pieces of research each year, and then another 2 or 3 smaller pieces. Obviously, the more the better. So I mentioned the first piece of work that we did a bit earlier, this state highways research, and I mean, by any measure it was a success. Just the slide sort of shows it here. We got a good media splash, really good coverage over all the channels, over not just one day, but over the course of a couple of weeks. What was really pleasing was some of the other advocacy groups sort of picking up on the work, and some of you might be familiar with the Northland Development Corporation in Whangarei, but fairly recently formed. They ended up sort of replicating the study, obviously with the Northland focus. So with imitation being the most sincere form of flattery, we must have been doing something right. But where this will come into its own is once we see the transport program start to develop with this government. There's some movement on some fronts with that, but in terms of developing a wider program, that's still some way off. And so what we really want to see and would expect to see is our messaging sort of finding its way in to the case that they are putting forward, the government's putting forward for its approach and for different projects. So that first piece of work is wrapped up late last year, and we've moved pretty quickly with the next. And so this is looking at congestion pricing or time of use charging, as Wayne Brown is opting to call it. I think I have to start calling that by the same name too now. But look, this is an example of how the work program can be somewhat Auckland-centric. It's not like we're going to see a congestion charging scheme in Hamilton or Whangarei anytime soon. But for any of you that operate fleets, it's going to impact on your business if and when it comes into operation. And for any of you that have come over from Tauranga, well, there's talk of this becoming part of the mix at some stage in the future. I'm not sure how quickly myself, but it could well be part of the mix. And so what we're doing with this is we're working with Auckland University to set up what's called a community panel on time of use charging. And it's like forming a really big focus group with probably 30 people who are selected as to represent the wider community, or to be reflective of the wider community in terms of demographics and things. Those 30 people come together in a group over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. They've taken a lot of information on congestion pricing, they hear from the experts, they deliberate and discuss, and at the end of it they produce a series of recommendations. In this case, what those recommendations will be is a set of principles that should form the approach to a congestion pricing scheme in Auckland. And those recommendations, with our help, are then provided back to government, or to council and to government. And there's some really useful insights through that. And so, the local and central government obviously see value in it because they've agreed to help us fund the project, which is great. But there's real benefit for our members, or our members see real benefit in it as well. A number of them are long-standing advocates for this sort of scheme because they see immediate benefit. They run freight businesses themselves and see that this would improve travel times and reliability and therefore make more money. And then other members of the group would be looking for opportunities to help design and deliver a scheme, which so obvious benefit there. So look, that's proceeding well. Probably April, May, we're looking to wrap that up. So keep your eyes out for that. And look, we haven't locked in the work program beyond that, but there is certainly scope for us to build on the initial piece of work in relation to highways. And I think the big part of that is again sort of tying into this or getting ahead of this policy development process over the course of the next year, and particularly if and when we see a 30-year infrastructure plan put together. And so I guess I would see two angles we could take there. Exactly what Don was talking about earlier in terms of promoting and building awareness of the opportunities to take the improved highway network south of Pairere, towards the central North Island and out towards Taranaki as well. And a lot of that comes down to pushing for a much more long-term vision of how we deliver infrastructure, because if we want a highway network that is going to be able to withstand the beating that our highway network took a year ago, we can't have a 20 or 30 or even 50-year horizon with this stuff. It's got to be more like 100 years. And when you make that mental shift in the approach to it, the economics change, the larger costs, which a much larger network would entail, can be assessed in quite a different way. I think the other role for us with that is to be helping to provide some guidance to the decision makers on how you're going to prioritise all of this and what are you going to start with. And so we're going to see the government policy statement come out in a couple of months. That'll have quite a lot of information on the objectives and the principles and things that are guiding the program. Well, I think that there's a role for us to say, okay, well, if those are the objectives, here are the projects that are best going to deliver against those objectives in terms of economic growth, resilience, and so on and so forth. So there's some really, really important work that we can do there. Now, one of the risks we run with this whole issue is that we can put together some really compelling arguments for this project or that project, this piece of highway or that section there, and we can take them to Simeon Brown or to Chris Bishop, and they will listen to us, agree with us violently, and say, we love it, it's got to happen, yep, it's got to happen, yes, I'll support that, but here's the thing, there's no money. The NLTF, the National Land Transport Fund, is tapped out, there's no way we can afford it, love to do it, can't, sorry, come back and see us in 10 years. And I'm being facetious, but only a bit facetious really, because we all know what a constraint that is, the funding side of things. So the point I'm making is that we need to be providing solutions on the funding and financing side of things as well. I've talked about this a bit in the past and done a bit of media and stuff on it. And I was doing an interview on it a couple of weeks ago and found myself just talking about value capture and changing debt funding approaches and things. And what I really reflect on is what we actually need here are some concrete examples of how countries or jurisdictions with the same needs and same challenges as New Zealand, some concrete, tangible examples of how they've used different funding and financing tools to address those challenges. And so I don't know what form that takes. It could be a piece of research, it could be a case of bringing in an international expert. I was just reading some stuff about Chile's highway network, recently, 2,000 kilometres of the national highway network that they developed and upgraded massively over during the 1990s and 2000s, drawing on private capital. Now, that might not necessarily be the answer, but there is certainly some resonances with things like that, and our role is to help open some eyes to that. And the other risk, of course, is that we get a lot of buy-in from this government, and then 3 or 6 or 9 or whatever it is years later, we get a change of government, and the next lot comes in and says, we don't really agree with any of that, and highways are great, but we want to see more done in rail freight and coastal shipping and e-bikes, thanks. And so all of those projects that were going to happen, well, they're not going to happen now. And so Tony and I were talking about this earlier. One approach that's been taken with that, particularly in Australia and other places as well, is to develop what's referred to as an infrastructure priority list. And what that involves doing is having this sort of list of projects, infrastructure projects, which aren't going to be messed with, right? That they sure that there may be some adjustments around the margins, and we've got to be realistic that any new government is going to have, there's always going to be political interference, you can't be naive about that, but the interference takes the form of prioritisation of that list and maybe tweaking the design and delivery elements. It doesn't take the form of what goes on the list or what doesn't. And so something like that needs to be part of the mix, and any projects that we are supporting, we would want to be included in something like that. But of course, that's just the highway network side of things, and we're obviously taking a much broader view on infrastructure issues. You'll see us delivering work on the electricity network and consenting requirements and a whole lot of other things like that as well. But look, coming back to Don's point, we've made a good start. We're doing some good work, and we're going to do more good work. But we could do a whole lot more with some more members. So look, if anybody's interested, if this resonates with you, please come and have a chat, and details should be there. And look, happy to take any questions or have a chat afterwards, whatever suits.
So any questions? I'm sure you're bustling with a whole bunch.
Hi, Jackie Church, Mayor of Waitangi District Council. I think it's fabulous. About time somebody in New Zealand, I've been banging on about this for quite a long time, is that 5 million people in the tiny little motto in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, we have to get over ourselves. I don't think we're the size of Melbourne. And if we don't continue to take that 100-year strategic direction of a lot of things, including all of our infrastructure, I'd add 3 waters into that space and taking the politics out of it. That's the one that's going to hurt people the most, and we're already flagging that in people's LTPs before this one, so happy to show you the disclosures of those things around wastewater and stormwater as an example for infrastructure, even in 2018, there's no what's happening now. So I really like what you're doing, and that whole partnering up. A couple of things that comes to mind, because a lot of us do talky, and then we planning, and then we revise our plan and do another talky, planning. And this came up in our infrastructure, how do we fund local government with this and I guess it's partly my idea, so I'm going to own that, is that until you establish your relationship first, and then the solutions come out of it. So I love that you're doing the thinking and the practical side of it, because we need policy to be practical. But actually, how I described it down in local government to how do we fund local government to central government, and that relationship is, are we putting a ring on it first? Are we getting into a relationship first to decide that through thick or thin, we are going to problem solve it together? Because there's lots of situations and examples, and I'm sure you can see that around the room, where a fantastically well thought out plan is presented to somebody else, and they go, yeah, nah, or not at the moment, rather than actually being inside the tent working with it. So I just flagged that one. what I've seen in my job is now there is a lot of that happening. We're actually not establishing a relationship with the key people first, saying, are you involved in this? Is this a bipartisan agreement over that long term, as you said, that infrastructure list? And are you committed to it? Because you can present your things, your list in 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, but you haven't actually got them into the into the commitment in the first place. The other one, of course, without getting into the politics, is you could be also reinventing a lot of wheels in your research that is all freely available, that lots of councils in that area could freely give you, because also you're extrapolating out along those corridors. We've got a 2070 growth strategy, for example, so we understand that portion really well. I'm sure the other councils in the area do. And so feeding that into that holistic picture so that you've got the portal of information through the depth, and so people can pick that out, including developers, I think that would be helpful.
That's good advice.
One of the things with NZIER, when they do the research, or whomsoever does the research, they would be drawing on those sorts of plans because they want to cite them if anyone, say for example, and I keep going on about Treasury, wish to actually argue against it. So that sort of data would be great.
It might be free.
Yeah. Well, that's NZIER. They actually did quite a good job of sourcing anything they could like that.
So as you get the information, I'd ask that, because I've done some work around our unformed legal roads with walking access and trails, which also the connectivity, because we want to protect our connectivity over time, whether it's corridors, unformed legal roads, which become the roads, which can become highways, etc. But also that social connectivity and to a lot of cultural, okay. And I've asked walking access whether they could have a portal, which they do, in terms of actually layering up strategies, actuals, intentions with the research, so that anybody, the developers, can go to one place and see those layers and pull them apart and add them together. So if you're going to do this sort of thing, I think you actually absolutely need one of those, and this is a time, right, when you've got ability to make portals of layering of those different pieces of data that are already existing.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Well, just adding, probably a statement, just adding to the point about that list you're talking about. So I've worked in Western Australia for about 10 years in the early 2000s to that mid 2008 to 2015, and saw that sort of Aussie Inc. Infrastructure list in practice, and it was, a couple of ones that come to mind where there was the Mandurah Expressway, which was 75 kilometres long, got done and was on the list. It got done and funded in one hit, sort of, as opposed to, say, the Waikato Expressway, which is great, but I worked on that, planning of that as a graduate in 1994, and only got finished in 2015, right? So, and they're multi-billion-dollar projects, and then just picking up the Mayor's point about water as well. So the other one was there's a big desalination plant, because they had much rain over there in WA. And that was like $1 billion plus project, and that was on the list because it was deemed to be essential for the growth of that state, and with the Aussie Inc. lens on it. So
was there much tinkering with it?
And it was, well, I don't know how the tinkering worked, because I was, I was on the delivery end, so it was like, great, I think one of the things we hear in the industry is about the pipeline. So industry knew that job was going to come up, people geared up for it and knew what was going to happen. So I don't know about the tinkering of it, but my understanding was once you got on the list, there was bipartisan, and I think you mentioned there might have been playing around with the edges, about some design details or delivery mechanisms, but it was on the list, and it stayed there until it was delivered. Then every few years they had to turn the handle, and some independent panel decided which was going to be the next best to go on the list. And so that sort of thing, I think Infrastructure Commission is looking at that sort of thing as well, so tying in with all that. And I think you guys have got a really good role of connecting the dots and drawing all those into...
We had an interesting meeting with the Infrastructure Commission about, this came up at a meeting with them late last year, and their comment was it would be extremely helpful if you were able to promote this, so we don't have to do it ourselves. That sort of come up against some roadblocks with it, and So that again, I speaks to the role of a group like this to be able to pick up an idea like that and push it.
So fundamentally with that roadway network that we threw up there as a vision, we're looking to get a groundswell of public opinion to say, yeah, that's what we want. So that someone in Hawke's Bay is talking to a minister, or someone in Northland is talking to an MP, or someone in the Waikato is having a chat with a cabinet minister. The same broad message is that we're after infrastructure, we're after something that connects the regions with Auckland. Because if I was a business person in Nanaki or Hamilton or well, probably more appropriately Hawke's Bay, I'd want to be able to get my goods to Auckland because that's the biggest market in the country by a country mile. So it's an economic imperative that we want to be able to put across the politicians. Once we do that, politicians will grab the idea as theirs and the whole thing starts to roll. So we're looking for you guys to contribute not only to the forum but also to the objectives as well, and talk it through with politicians so that it becomes something that the country wants, because it's in the best interests of New Zealand.
Question around it. So I'm just curious in terms of the hairy chestnut of funding, and I get that. What has anybody sort of floated, particularly with Simeon Brown, I guess, and the infrastructure commission, just around, if a proposal was brought for a funding mechanism, would that turbocharge? I'm just interested in, has that question been asked, and what was the reaction?
I've got no doubt that unsolicited bids are turning up all the time and have been. I mean, if we're talking PPPs, which I assume you're talking about, yeah, I mean, I'm aware of piles of them that have people like me have been brought in to help, whether it's a Spanish or a French or a Canadian player, or come into the market and say, hey, yeah, we've got a solution for you, we could do it this way. The previous government didn't want to have anything to do with that.
I understand. Where I'm going with the question is, I think we're all in agreement that the problem is that everything's done in small little bites, little chunk there, little chunk there. If we actually had, and I think back to your point, is that if we actually had broad agreement and political buy-in at a point in time that says, right, we're going to commit to $50 million worth of work here, funding's on the table. The question is there political appetite to lock that in on the basis of the empirical evidence that says, not just one region, like 5 or 6 different regions around Papua New Ireland are going to grow and prosper out of this, and therefore actually deliver those tangible societal outcomes, which was what the politicians like so much. But to be able to sort of say, right, funding's on the table, PPP, whatever it might be, and that you can then commit to a 15, 20-year program of work. The thing is, at what point does it actually become unpickable?
A couple of things. One, you've got to have the country behind you. You've got to actually take the country with you. And that is making the politicians aware that people want this particular, whatever the pie is that we're putting out. And the only way at the moment for this government, from what they're telling us, to be able to pay for it, is private capital has got to be involved in some way, shape. Now, it may not have all of it, it may have all of it, I don't know. But they are going, this government, I think, will be open to those sorts of opportunities because they ain't got no money.
I don't have any doubt at all that they're open to it, and not just because they think that'll work, but also to demonstrate their sort of centre-right, market-friendly credentials.
Because it just sort of strikes me, I think, to Don's point there, is that probably the best value that right now we can add to this conversation as local chambers is making sure that our region is 100% on board with this. We actually got, that, I guess, that in writing support from a broad cross spectrum and says, right, we understand the benefit to our community that this actually brings. Here's our commitment. It's in blood, you've got that. I think that's where I think where's local chambers can bring real value to the table.
I'd add a little bit to that. Equally, it's also other regions saying, yeah, that's a good idea. So it's not just the Waikato saying the Waikato Expressway is the only thing that they should do. It's a network that connects us all. However they put it together is the real key. And it is New Zealand Inc., not Tauranga, Napier, whatever. So if we are, well, the classic way to beat someone is to divide and conquer. If we're divided, you won't get half as much as you want. Other regions will get their shit together and they will be far more vocal and have a far more pressing proposition.
All of those time frames, roading, waters, growth, energy all go together. You take one of those out, it doesn't work. So one of the confronting things that I'll find the date for you, but in the time frame that you're talking, 70% of the population of Aotearoa New Zealand will be Taupo North. So when you talk about consultation and discussions with who we are, and that's an implication, that's a lot of vast implication for your Northern Infrastructure Forum. But you take all of those things out, and so the other thing, having had Blue Float in on Monday, so offshore wind, and their status at 2045, there'll be a double the demand for power that it is today. Now, that's almost, that's like LTP based, almost. It comes out away for us. That's within our growth strategy. So, and where is that extra power coming from? Because we only have corridors. Sure, you go through, but you won't be able to stop to even go to the bathroom or have a pile on the way, right? The power's not there. So there's a real connectivity of putting those things on one piece of paper on that mapping and saying, well, one of those out doesn't work.
Is that growth in demand? Is that as a result of EVs?
That's their opinion of the sustainability of the energy and demand in New Zealand.
It was actually touched on by...
But we don't talk about that. That's why I wanted to bring it to our mayoral forum, for example, because it's not our lane, but the implications, no point in us, even if we beat what the waters issues are, those confronting issues, and got road in there, whatever the fragility of that road or not, that you can use it. But then if we can't actually have power to have those growth and those corridors, and so therefore we need to be cognizant of understanding the limitations in that sector.
Cool. Any other questions that, yeah, Carla?
Kia ora, Carla, Hawke's Chamber of Commerce. Drove up this morning, know what roading and infrastructure looks like. Just going back to what you were saying before, John, I think it's really important that we all advocate in our own regions and we're talking the same story. So 2 weeks ago was our cyclone anniversary, 1 year, and that's when we were made an island. Now, we had Minister Nicola Willis come up and talk to us. She wanted to speak to some of the leaders in the region. So it was myself and 8 other people, being the regional council, the mayors, Lawrence Yule, who you know. So she came up, and what we did was we spoke to each other before the meeting, and we said, well, we've got heaps of things that are an issue, and we want to set up resilience. Let's choose one topic. So we chose roading and infrastructure. And we went round, and every single person in that room spoke to what was important for the regional council and the environment. I spoke to business, but we all came back to infrastructure and roading. And her response was, thank you so much, this is better than a 50-page report. So maybe if we can take that on board, it worked well for us, because we need to be connected to Auckland.
In the Waikato, we've long been known as a chief at every bend, and everyone has their own little agenda. What you've done in the Hawke's Bay is something that in the Waikato we would want to follow, but equally in the Upper North Island we want to do the same thing. So that if Nicola Willis happens to go to Taranaki, they're saying the same thing as Tim might be saying up in Whangarei.
And it was a phone call. So I was speaking to our regional economic development people and the the councils, and then I was speaking to the next person, and we were all literally on the same page. So, yeah, Three Waters came up, and a lot of other issues, but our main subject remained the same.
Interesting. Any further?
Yeah, just a quick question. I was just wondering, does the Chamber believe, this government believes in imports or exports? Because, you talk about getting Tauranga to the port there, which brings in 50% of all the imports, but also export a huge amount of product overseas. Just wondering, what do you think the government, what's your view on what the government thinks around that?
Yeah. My
Because
pick,
otherwise you're arguing the point that they're not going to say yes to you.
my pick with this government is that they will take money wherever they can find it, because they don't have a great deal. The more exports.
And getting to a point, so keeping your ports like that. So in roading projects,
Yep.
yeah.
So if you do that roading projects there, you link all 5 ports from Whangarei to Napier, to Taranaki, to Auckland, to Tauranga. And if you do have an issue such as happened with the Hawke's Bay, the other ports can pick up the slack. So they will be interested in that.
Like a 3 hours to get trucks into the port that's halfway up the Kaiwai over the Tauranga bypass.
I don't think they will have a view. They won't have a strategy on that. I don't think nothing like suggests. Yeah, the thinking just is not that evolved. And currently, the focus across every portfolio is 100-day plan, 100-day plan, 100-day plan. So in terms of thinking of the bigger picture stuff, I would almost guarantee that's a one for later.
Any other questions or thoughts you want to share? Cool. This presentation is available to any of you. We'll flick it out to you if you want to take it to talk to others in your community about it and get some feedback. But we'd very much like you to come on board with the infrastructure forum. So thank you for coming out to Hautapu. It's a very good reason why we chose to come out here, quite apart from the hospitality from the Ross Brothers. You see an example of an expressway and the economic prosperity it's brought. You have a look across the other side to Cambridge. There's a phenomenal amount of building and infrastructure going in there. You come across here, there's a heap of industrial, etc. So commerce follows arterial routes, and this is a very good example of it. So, Peter.
John, great presentation, but what's next? What will happen is we're all going to go to corners. You might get a few people fund some of this. What's next?
We'll decide on a project to actually research and get on with it.
A project or a master plan?
That's actually a very good point. I would think a master plan is probably what the government is looking for. If we go back to the earlier comment, they don't have a vision for something like this. So that might be the best place to start as an overlay.
You've got the base of the master plan there, and I think that the next big step now is we need to go and sell that. That's a great idea. Leveraging, exactly, to Aaron's point, leveraging on the benefits of port connectivity, better management of goods in and out. So I think, sorry, the point back there is it's like, we've got to sort of say it's that dual thing. We need efficient export, we need efficient import. Get those two things operating very, very well. That's a great, and EZBI will help us improve the evidence.
Good point, Peter. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
It's there, but I think if you're going to take it to it's no good going to Wellington with a half-baked plan. So you've got lines of a plan, but it needs an economic report wrapped around it with a very focused, what are we calling, five highways and 5 ports, and then taking Jackie's point around power and water, which would be easy. It sounds easy, Jackie, but overlay it, right? Right? Yeah. And then go with an economic report. It may not be perfect first up. But you've only got 2.5 years now. You're in an electoral cycle, you're halfway through the first year. So you've got to get it into cycle and get go, yep, this looks good, let's do the next piece of work and then go again. But we've got all that. I agree, but you're bringing them into one piece and you know, it's a bit of a political point. You're going to cross partisan as well, because you should get the other politicians, you know.
Well, it was interesting when we did the first piece of research. It was taken to both major parties, Labor and National, to fit in with their policy work. And Labor said, yeah, 10 years. And National said, roads of national significance. So they accepted it differently, but they nodded when it came to the idea of the two expressways.
Just, I mentioned that piece of work that the Northland Development Corporation has commissioned. That's probably quite a good example of what we could do. So that's focused on a sort of Auckland to Whangarei highway. So sort of taking what we've already done and you know, going Wellsford to Whangarei, but then from Whangarei to Kaikoui, I think it is. So it's kind of north of Whangarei as well, and it's just sort of for the first time saying, well, this is what it would cost. These are the sorts of benefits that it would generate, and it's you know, that ground just hasn't been covered by anyone else until now. So I think that type of analysis would be involved in.
I think, Pete, from what you've just said, if that was one of the major points that we did almost immediately, we would get ourselves into the early part of an electoral cycle, so it then becomes wrapped up in either party's policy statements early on. Their thinking is on something that's bigger than just a new dam or something similar. Okay. Any other thoughts, anything you want to share?
I'd like to ask that Waikato District Council being the gateway to Waikato is one of them. So what I've found is that Waikato Tahi's planning stops at the border of Tokopong Bay. So I'm getting feedback from people like horticulturists, because we all want our onions in our supermarkets, but a lot of the planning stops for Auckland North and then Waikato South. So if you've got there's someone in the room from Waikato Tahi, please, because I'm doing this every second month, that we actually, because it comes back to this holistic planning between the no borders, but for whatever reason there's that resource issue or whatever. So that would be helpful to solve, particularly in this infrastructure space.
There's something over the back there as well?
I was just going to say, Barney, how can you fund this infrastructure without asking local government or central government for a dollar?
Yeah, that's the $100 billion question. I guess at the end of the day, someone's got to pay, right? And so funding and financing is often confused. We often say, oh, PPPs, we've still got to pay for them. It's just the way we pay for them changes. I guess one thing that I've often thought is an obvious part of it is changing the way we debt finance or debt fund stuff, right? So rather than the current approach, which is, and I mean, I've been away from this for a little while and probably not articulating it well, but basically it's been a case of, okay, well, let's just save up and then go one room at a time, like expand the house one room at a time based on what we've saved over the past year, rather than borrowing a lot more, doing the whole house and getting that benefit far sooner and paying back intergenerationally. So I think that's part of it, is simply being prepared to borrow more, and you know, that comes at a cost in terms of your debt ceiling, but that has to be part of it. You know, we could look at if there's community buy-in for it at private roads in some places.
Can I help you, Barney?
Yeah.
Can I help you a little bit?
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of these conversations because I represent a funder that can pay for them. And there is some discrepancies in how government can handle it. So they say, well, I could just raise my SDM and get Treasury to pay for the whole thing, but then we'd be criticised for running a debt up too high and then go pay it back. So this is the interest rates that would be provide as a vendor, and then we say, okay, well, let's go to the user basis. So there's got to be some, like you said, some community buy-in in terms of what does user pay look like, because that's essentially what's going to end up paying it back, as the government can't pay it back. They might be able to pay a portion of that, but you've got to speed up the cash flow of how it's repaid, essentially. So then we've got to,
But the user's never going to pay for all of it. If that was going to be the case, the toll would have to be 15 or 20 bucks, not $2.20. So there must be a middle ground somewhere there, where the user isn't necessarily paying for all of it, but the user's paying for a lot more in order to make it possible.
There's a difference between how much do I need to get going and when can my cash flow start on my user base system. There's a void there of X many years, X many dollars. They just
But there are examples overseas of how that's done, and we need to learn from that. And that, again, is a piece of research. Malaysia is a classic 6-lane highway from Johor through to KL, and it's all paid for by someone travelling on a toll, and you don't even know the toll has been taken. You've got a little piece of equipment in your windscreen that transmits it to an overhead part, but you've paid your money beforehand because you bought 50 bucks worth or whatever it happens to be. So the money, the cash flow, the money's up front. It works remarkably well, doesn't hurt anyone, and everyone contributes. It's a good example. Right, anything else? Thank you very, very much for coming along, and we really appreciate it and look forward to keeping in communication. We'll send you the slide deck, and we'll keep in touch so that we can get some form of wave going to make it a reality. It's the other part to it. Thanks.